Okay, so it is 6:36 and I will start the policy committee meeting. Our agenda, we'll start with the policy number 6030 school calendar for discussion. Okay, so I know if you guys got the new policy, there were some revisions that didn't quite make the last one, so it was resent out, but I'll go over it so you won't miss anything.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing is that the changes from the current policy to the new policy are, we added junior under number 5, 128. We changed the day to 180th instead of 183rd and 131. There's no line number here, but the second page under the superintendent shall be charged with, we changed April to January, and we deleted the paragraph underneath that. Then, so the main thing that we were discussing was the observation of holidays and naming them versus just calling them a holiday. So we did look at the Connecticut statute, which is section 1 to 4, and it says these days designated as legal holidays, and it names them all, and they are New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Christmas, and President's Day. And then it says you observe them, which does not necessarily mean that you have school, but if you don't have school, then it's a observed holiday, and then if you choose to have school, then you have to have some sort of non-sectarian educational program in observance of such holiday. So
Yeah, but those isn't that only for Memorial Day and Labor Day that you can, and
No.
Martin Luther King Jr. Day?
Would be clarified this year, the new regs that will come out, is that you can do that for any holiday except for holidays falling in December and January. So you
Yes.
see what they covered.
it says, when any such holiday, except holidays in January and December, occurs on a school day, each local and regional board of ed may close the public schools under its jurisdiction for such day, or hold a session of the public schools on such day, provided if a session is held, the board shall require each school to hold a suitable non-sectarian educational program in observance of such holiday. So that is the quote. And then there's a couple of things that had changed just regarding President's Day. That it's now Lincoln's Day, Washington's birthday is President's. Okay, so I know there was discussion about, should we just say holiday? Should we change them all to holiday? Should we leave them as is? Right now, the most recent calendar that we had approved for 2022, 2023, we actually have Labor Day, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur labeled with no school. And then October 10th, we have labeled as school holiday, and I believe that was one of the bones of contention. And then it says no school professional development. Then we have November 24th, 25th labeled as Thanksgiving recess. We have December 26th to January 2nd labeled as winter recess, which I think if you actually follow this Connecticut statute should also be labeled /Christmas/New Year's Day. Then January 16th is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, no school. And then February 20 to 21 is February break, which President's Day falls under. So I guess it should be /President's Day. So in my opinion, after having read through this multiple times, and having our discussion from the last committee meeting, I would prefer to leave it exactly how the statute says. If these days are designated as legal holidays by Connecticut statute, then we leave them in. And it does not mean that it's a holiday where they don't have school, but then as the statute says, you have to hold a school educational program in observance of their school. And that's my opinion, and then we'll have Jen's opinion and Maureen's opinion, and then Seth's opinion, and then we'll move it to a vote. Right, go.
So I'm in agreement. If the statute says we follow the legal holidays, which state of Connecticut and federally, they're all named, then I think we just need to stay consistent with what the state statute says, because that's what we do with all of our other policies, is that we stay consistent. I also think that I don't like the idea of taking all of the names of holidays off of the calendar, civic or religious. I think they all deserve their recognition, and I also don't think that you can discount one when you have all of the others named, specifically when the state itself recognizes these days as holidays.
And for future reference, when Connecticut decides to change their statute, we will also change our policy to be compliant.
Right, yeah, that's the biggest thing, you know, if state statute says X and we follow state statute with all of our other policies, then I don't think we should cherry pick something out to not follow.
So I think then if we're going to do that, and I'll get to you in a second, Maureen, then under line 27, where we say observe Labor Day, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Thanksgiving Day, et cetera, as holidays for students, we might want to somehow reword that to actually literally state the holidays that are designated as legal holidays as observed, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a non-school holiday. So I'm not really sure how you want to word that or your thoughts on that.
Right, so you're talking about, so the day, like Veterans Day, where we.
Right, because we always do something on Veterans Day, but it's not actually listed here, but by Connecticut statute, it is a designated legal holiday, and we do provide the educational program every year, like.
So we probably want to put in a new 6 that would cover that, for Veterans Day.
Okay, Maureen? Another word to look.
Hi, I'm sorry, I was muted. I've given this a lot of thought since we met, and I don't feel like my position or my opinion on it has changed. I can see reasons for both, but my preference would be to just, for the purposes of the calendar, to just say school holiday. And the reason I feel that way is because I always want us to bring us back to the mission of what the Board of Education is. And we're trying to reach every single child every single day. We're trying to be inclusive. And I feel that we're missing a lot of holidays that our students do celebrate. They're not on the calendar. They're not days off. And then we have holidays on the calendar that some of the students do not celebrate. It doesn't seem fair and inclusive and in the direction that we want to move. So I think it would just be more inclusive if we just said school holiday for the purposes of the calendar, and then of course still encourage the conversations in the classroom and the celebrations that the schools put on for all the various events. So that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Maureen. Yeah, wanna weigh in?
Yeah. First of all, to Jen's point, and also you both made the point that that's the way the state statute is, and we just want to follow and be consistent with the state statute. I would respectfully point out that there are any number of state statutes and federal laws and regs and statutes that we don't follow, and that it's legal for us to not follow. For just 2 quick examples, our school climate policy does not track exactly with the state policy. It includes the state policy, but then we go beyond that to add additional stuff that isn't included in the state policy. Another example at the federal level is we don't follow, and this board took a vote to not follow the federal school lunch program policy. And that allows us to have more flexibility with snack foods and having fundraisers where you sell candy or candy bars and stuff like that, and baked goods. So there are any number of situations where
I don't know if I call that a statute though. I mean, it's not,
It's a
we have
statute.
but we have the option to opt out. It wasn't like we're not following a statute because we, by law, have to follow statutes.
No, statutes set there are some prescriptive statutes that require you to affirmatively do something. But then you can part from that statute in various ways, as long as you're hitting that de minimis requirement. So yes, there could be a statute that offers a choice, right? But the whole purpose of the school lunch program was inclusion, and we decided, not for our town. You know what I mean? So.
But what I'm saying is that it was an option to opt out. It's not like we're just not following the statute.
Okay, and similarly, the statute at issue right now, which is the holiday, observed holidays statute, does not require us to name the holidays what they are named. They reference those holidays by name so that everyone knows what date you're talking about, because it's easier than, especially some of them move around on the calendar from year to year. January 1st is January 1st, July 4th is July 4th. But, you know, where Easter falls in a given year changes. Where, you know, where Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah fall in a given year changes. So
Those are two dates that we include in our policy as holidays that is not listed in the Connecticut statute.
exactly, and that's enough, that underscores my point, which is we are free as a district to depart from the statute, right? And in fact, there's a movement, and I would like Craig to weigh in on this, or Dr. Cook. There's a movement afoot among some districts to move away from the holiday naming conventions because of the concept of inclusion. And I think it would also recognize the true purpose of our academic calendar, which in my opinion is really just to let people know when they're supposed to be in school and when they don't have to be, right? There's no need for us to celebrate or exclude any people for, you know, whether they identify with a particular holiday or not. And I think it would be, especially as Maureen said, you know, it would be not only a nod to our mission of inclusivity of every child, you know, but also a 21st century skill we would be modeling for our students to show that kind of inclusiveness and say, you know, we're not going to stand on, you know, we're not going to stand on ceremony from, you know, the way it used to be done, but instead we're going to try to be more inclusive. I can tell you how I felt as a child growing up, and I do take this personally, right? I'm Jewish, right? And so I always felt excluded around Christmas time growing up in school. And another thing I would argue, and this would be my final argument, is, you know, if you're talking about Christmas, Christmas Eve, Easter, those holidays always fall on a non-school day because our break encompasses them.
No, our break does not normally encompass Easter. It did this past year, but historically speaking, it does not.
It does, Easter Sunday, maybe not Good Friday, but Easter Sunday.
But I'm saying that it's not a break. It's not with spring break. It's a Sunday, yes, but it's not a break. That
It's
is just
not
a
always,
weekend.
depending on where the holiday falls, it's not always a part of the
Spring
piece
vacation.
of the
Yeah.
school calendar where kids are out of school, is what Diana's saying.
Yes, no, and that's fine.
The only reason it's never in school is because it is on a weekend. Anything that falls on a weekend will never be during school.
Yeah.
Just by.
But by that logic, you know, if you're saying you would have to call it, you know, Good Friday, because if we ever observe it, that doesn't necessarily follow. And to call something Christmas when Christmas doesn't fall on a school day is almost forcing the point. You know, when I don't see it goring anyone's ox to call it winter break, you know,
Well,
and
The only reason I brought that up specifically was because when I looked back historically at previous years, it used to be listed as Christmas, and then it was changed to winter. And I don't think it was something that was done, you know, intentionally, like, oh, I want to leave Christmas out, or anything like that, or with any sort of, you know, mischief. I think it was just like, because if you look at it, it's just inconsistent within our calendar itself. Sometimes it says this, sometimes it says that, and I think it's just dependent on who happened to be there at that time and how it was typed up or whatever. And so in my way of thinking is the way the Connecticut statute reads, naming the particular holidays that are legal holidays, then I would like to follow that, because just like every other statute that we have to follow, I may not like it, but we follow it because it's statute. And then I'm not gonna argue anymore on it, but I want Dr. Cook's weighing in on his opinion.
Sure.
For like a quick minute.
I'll-
30 seconds.
I'll take a minute. So, as Seth had shared, many districts are moving towards just naming it as a school holiday. That would be my recommendation. We have holidays that fall on different days, and we only list them when they did hit school days. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur being an example. If those did fall on a Saturday, we would not typically list them in previous calendars. And so I think the purpose of the calendar, as I said at the last meeting, was to really, signal to families when we're in school, when we're out of school. It's not for, to them, let them know when holidays really fall. So I think that's the most effective way is would be to just list school holidays. I think the fact I would say too that Shipman doesn't have a school calendar policy speaks to that it's not statutory requirements really left to the boards of ed. And the other piece I would share is with Juneteenth, that would also fluctuate. It probably wouldn't normally be in our calendar, but if we had enough snow days, we would have to address that in our calendar. So I think that's something we'll have to be mindful of going forward. So I think that listing up just the general school holiday is probably the easiest way to do so going forward. I'd like to catch on Veterans Day and include that will be holding school events on those days.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't notice that. So not every date that was listed on our previous calendars with a naming, like sometimes Columbus Day was listed with no school, but it's almost always a professional development day.
Right.
But Veterans Day, we typically do have school, but it is listed. So I just feel like, to be consistent.
Right, and I would definitely want to bring that consistency going forward.
I had asked at one point that we get council's input on this, and Craig, could you share what we got back from Shipman?
Yes, apologize, because that was not my packet.
Yeah, I didn't get that anywhere.
This.
Because I don't actually know, did they actually weigh in on it? Because previously when they were asked, they would just say, we don't have a calendar policy.
Basically, that was it. They said it would be really up to the board, just making sure we're following the December, January piece. Send that.
So the main things that, besides that, the changes in policy 6030 school calendar with the change of the 180th day from 183rd, and the other changes that I had mentioned. I don't think anyone has any problems with those. Maureen, feel free to weigh in if you have an issue with something. So then the only thing that would be different would be number 5, the observance of. So I think that the committee should just take a vote on it about moving this policy forward for the entire board to discuss it.
Yeah.
So I would need a motion then. Or
Can I say one more thing? To your point that you made earlier, Diane, I remember we took a 5-year look back at all the calendars, and we saw that it was inconsistent what was called a holiday, what wasn't from year to year, and pretty much concluded that it was just who happened to type it that year. It was never intentional that the holidays were called different things on the calendar from year to year, but that happened quite a bit. And that's another reason why I think that this would simplify that process and make sure that that problem and that mistake didn't happen again if we just called the days off, school holiday rather than named them, because that will continue. Different people will over the years type it up and those things will happen. But if it's school holiday, that would be another reason that, I just thought of when you mentioned that to go in that direction. And I also would want to do it too to support Dr. Cook, since that is his recommendation and that means a lot to me. So I understand your points of view and I respect them and I get it. And, part of me, I don't really like change. Um, and I liked all these years calling them by their holidays and, for my children to hear about different holidays, and I enjoyed it. But, when I reflect upon it, I really think it just logistically, it's much more difficult. And mostly I do think it, as I mentioned before, it's not fair to our students that we have students that celebrate holidays and those are not mentioned on the calendar. But holidays they do not are mentioned on the calendar. And I just think moving in the direction of being more inclusive, that's why I feel the way I do.
So I do want to mention that in previous years, like I'm looking at the 2017-2018 calendar, July 4th, although we do not have school, is listed as Independence Day holiday. And then there's Labor Day holiday, Rosh Hashanah, Columbus Day, no school, Veterans Day, school day, Thanksgiving holiday, December break. And it actually says regional because we do try to align. Then we have New Year's Day holiday, Martin Luther King Day holiday, February break, President Day, Good Friday holiday, regional April break, Memorial Day holiday. That's it. And that is pretty much the same for the following year. So I think that we just need to move it forward. So we need some sort of motion on this policy. I would recommend to vote or to move that we recommend policy 6030 with the changes that we made regarding the 180th day, et cetera, et cetera. And I would also say with the amendment of including the names of the holidays with the dates on the school calendar as we have done in the past. And then we can vote it up or down and just move it forward. So this isn't sitting in committee forever.
Yeah, I agree. I think it needs to get everybody's input at this point. We've talked about all of our different viewpoints and now it's time to take it to the full board for final decision.
All right, so make a motion.
Okay. Motion to move policy number 6030 school calendar forward with the amendments to 183rd day, change to 180th day,
But with the revisions as revised in our copy.
okay, with the revisions as revised in our copy and with the addition of the names of school holidays being published on the school calendar.
Do I have a second? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Abstained. So it passes 2-1, and we'll move it forward for the whole board so that we can discuss it. Afterward. Get better, more input.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on. Did anyone say anything else before we move on to the next? All right, policy 1150, prohibition against nicotine and cannabis use. All right, so one of the changes, you got 2 copies. One of them had Shipman and Goodwin's notes, sort of like alongside of it, like very, very super tiny print. And so some of the changes that they recommended and some of the changes that we were looking for was to include the prohibition of possession and use of alcohol on school property. So the first change that we have the revised copy in front of us, and also I noted that there were some changes that were not made. So the first revision that Shipman and Goodwin were discussing, they felt that if we wanted to include the use and possession of alcohol to be prohibited on school grounds, that we can certainly add it in. They also recommended that we remove smoking, nicotine, and cannabis use from the title and just leave it prohibition and get smoking. But if we decide to add in the alcohol part, then I would suggest we change it to the prohibition against smoking, possession, and use of tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol. Because you would have to add in the possession and use if you're gonna include the alcohol. If you were not gonna include the alcohol, then you could just say prohibition against smoking, which is what should have been included and recommended if we were just talking about tobacco and cannabis. So, the other comment that they had, was regarding. This is last fall, Connecticut legislature expanded the existing ban on smoking on school grounds by expressly prohibiting smoking or vaping marijuana in any area of the school buildings or facilities under the school control. However, it did not go so far as to prohibit the possession of marijuana or its recreational use on school grounds. So if we wanted to prohibit, we added in the statement, the board further prohibits the use or possession of, and that was the changes in lines 14 and 15, and that paragraph there. Lines 24 and 25 prohibits the possession, sale, or use of alcohol in any area of the school building, on school property, or at school-sponsored activities by any individual at any time. And I just wanted to make a comment, again, this is under community and school relations. This is not, we already have policies for staff and students. And then they suggested that we delete lines 32 through 34. Because it's sort of redundant. And then we read the other changes. Chip and Bruin didn't have any other comments. I did have a question though, and I didn't know if you have any comments on this, Dr. Cook. But when we talk about the school property, shall mean any land, I'm looking at line 57, sorry. School property shall mean any land and all temporary and permanent structures comprising the district school and administrative office buildings, and includes, but it's not limited to, classrooms, hallways, storage facilities, theaters, gymnasiums, fields, and parking lots. And I thought, is there any instance where a member of the community is on a school bus? Or we might want to include school buses in that phrase?
Yeah, they could be, yes, they could be going.
Because I know that we include school buses in the language for students.
Right.
So I'm wondering if we should add in school buses there to just cover the bases as well.
I did great. Yep.
Okay. So we'll add fields, school buses, and parking lots. And did anyone have any other comments about the changes? And I want you to weigh in on the name and inclusion of the alcohol. And then we can move this forward. We'll start with you, Jen.
No other recommendations, but I do think I'd be in favor of adding in the alcohol use as well into this policy, just to cover all of our bases.
And so then, is your feeling with the title, change it to prohibition against smoking, possession, and use of tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol?
Yes,
And it's lengthy, but
it covers our bases, and it's very clear. It's very clear about what we're talking about, so I would be in favor of that.
all right, Maureen?
I agree with that. That sounds perfect.
Seth?
I just have a practical question. So this is in the school and community relations
Yeah.
section. I think there is a benefit to stating our position, but as a practical matter, and I think it's important for us to take a position that these things are unhealthy and we shouldn't expose our students or teachers to them by virtue of allowing community members to ignore our rules when they're on our property or at our events. But as a practical matter, is there any enforcement impact that this
Well, there can be.
permits? Like, I mean, you know, and I'm really, I guess I'm asking Dr. Cook, does that mean that we're able, we can obviously ask someone to leave if they're using something in violation of this policy. Does it also enable us to authorize a school member, school board employee, including guards, whatever, to take any action or enforcement action or to, you know, like call the police or anything like that? But what does it do?
Well, line 27 says members of the community who fail to comply with this policy may be required to leave school property and may be referred to the police. Line 27, 28. I'm only wondering now if we should actually remove the sentence that follows about students or employees, because this is not regarding them. Line 28. Kind of redundant because we already have policies for faculty and for.
It is a reminder. It is a reminder though,
It's a
because you know,
reminder.
kids think, oh, I'm going to a playoff game in Old Saybrook or something. You know, I'm not on school property, you know?
Right, or
But then that was falling
there's
under
some other schools that are coming to watch, perhaps, maybe they fall under the student category if they're coming, a student from another school.
Yeah, but not that we have any kind of
And
authority.
then they just be
to
members of
discipline
the
them.
community for us.
And yeah, I guess they would just be a community member at that point if they're not a
They'd
member
really
of
be
our school
a
community.
guest because they're not.
And that's the only thing that I would question about this particular paragraph would be the students or employees, just because we already have policies regarding that. But we can leave it in, if it doesn't do any harm.
I mean, I wonder if also, does it say guest anywhere? I'm sorry.
The only piece as Seth brings up, I just think of a situation where maybe a well-intentioned member of the public brings a gift wrapped bottle of wine, something that not school friends.
But I think that unless it's being a problem, no one's gonna even know.
Cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's
right.
like, usually you think of this as, well, if someone is imbibing on school property,
Yes.
then we have a policy that says you can't possess, you can't use on school property, even if you're a member of the community. And I think it's only a problem when they become a problem. Or actually say probably would be removed anyway for like their behavior.
Well, it's like, I'm just thinking, like, you have like a flask in your pocket, and you're like, oh, well, I wasn't drinking it here, I had
But
this
in your
before
pocket,
I
nobody
came.
knows.
Right.
Well,
That's
the problem is,
yeah.
it's not good practice to create a rule that you're expecting to not be enforced in certain ways unless you explicitly state that. You know what I mean? So
Well, we're
Should it be
saying
we should have a
like,
gift wrapped exemption
Or-
among adults or, you know what I mean? But
Do you say that it's,
but we already have a
open
policy on
containers
smoking.
versus-
If you're not allowed, this is all for community school relations, if you're not allowed to use tobacco or cannabis, it's the same thing, how are you gonna back that up? It's the same thing, you're gonna be asked to leave. So you just tack me on alcohol because that really shouldn't be here either. And it's the same thing. You have it, you can't have it, go.
there's no other policy that addresses alcohol for school community relations and alcohol.
There are very few policies for community. Tons of policies for students and
Yeah.
staff.
Can I ask, has that been an issue with the alcohol in the past with the community? I don't remember it ever coming up to be a problem. Has it been?
People tailgate.
Yeah, it
But that's more the surf club, so then it's like, is that school property or is that town property, just because it's a school game?
I don't know, because signage went up, I remember this pre-pandemic, signage went up talking about families who I think were tailgating, if they were tailgating while a school-sponsored athletic event was going on, they were not supposed to have alcohol at their tailgate. So it pre-pandemic, there must have been some sort of issue.
I remember there was
Surrounding
issues
it.
at surf club with alcohol and it was not the students and it was not the
Yeah.
staff, it was the community. So I just think we're prohibiting the use of smoking, tobacco, cannabis. I see no problem with doing it with alcohol. We have it for staff, we have it for students. There's no reason to have alcohol on a school campus.
Right, and to your point, Seth, what happens on the surf club picnic grounds, that's one thing, but if somebody were to try to come into the stadium with it or to be intoxicated while in our stadium and causing liability issues with falling up or down the bleachers or off the bleachers, just to give some sort of authority for removal.
Well, but this doesn't say anything about the state of being intoxicated, does it?
Well, it's a possession, sale, or use of.
Yeah, that's on the, like, if you're tailgating, I mean, you could be too cute by half where someone's tailgating and drinks a fifth of whiskey in the parking lot and then stumbles in and gets hurt on the bleachers, you know, look, we can't control everything. I think this is intended as a policy statement that also gives us some enforcement authority by way of, you know, contacting the police or, you know, so I don't oppose this at all. Adding alcohol, yeah, fine. Yeah.
All right, we have a motion then?
So people, it would be okay for people to tailgate just if they didn't come into the game? Is that what I'm understanding? And have
They can
alcohol?
come into the game under this too. They just can't be possessing while they're coming in.
Yeah.
Or using.
Yeah, because if it's town
Not that we're
property
promoting
that
that.
has its own rules,
Yeah.
then, you know, we can't, I guess, necessarily impose our rules on what would be town or beach and rec property, but
Right.
could impose rules on people coming onto our athletic fields or into our buildings or onto our buses and that sort of thing. So,
All right,
Okay.
all right,
And
we're all in
what-
support. Let's just
And
have-
what about the gift? Are we just going to just not worry about that if it was a gift of a bottle of wine or something?
Well, someone would have to see it,
Okay,
think about it,
all
make
righty.
an issue of it. So hopefully they're not giving it to a student.
Okay.
there you go.
All right, can we have a motion then for policy 1150, to change the name to prohibition against smoking, possession, and use of tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol with the revisions that are in this policy provision, with the addition of school buses to line 59.
So
So moved.
So move, Jen, can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, all in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So that will be going on to the board. Oh my goodness, okay. This is not moving nearly as quickly as I wanted it to. All right, policy 4112.8, nepotism. Let's see. So the current policy was short. It was revised by Shipman and Goodwin to be more in alignment with theirs, which we felt was very restrictive. And I have a question and some suggestions that are kind of off the wall. So the first question is for Dr. Cook. And if I look at the revised version of 4112.8, and I'm looking at line number 27. So this is the prohibitions on hiring no immediate family member of a board member or any other district level administrator shall be hired to any position of employment. A district level administrator means whom?
So I view a district level administrator as central office, which is different than a school building administration.
So,
which
and
is-
it doesn't include you because you're in the line above it, no relative or immediate family member, superintendent. So would it also include, like, say, our assistant superintendent?
Yes, and
And,
Heather Dobson and Elizabeth Haggard, so
all right, so it's a small group of people, but, okay, so I was thinking about this. So I was trying to figure out, we did talk to Shipman and Goodwin, and they said, you know, it's our policy, we can do whatever we want with it. Most of the policy wording I like because it is so prohibitive and it protects us, you know, up, down, and sideways. But with the thoughts of having a very small applicant pool for, you know, very limited subjects. So here's a thought, and we can work it, but work it fast. What if we add a statement, something along the lines of no immediate family member of a board member or any other district level administrator shall be hired to any position of employment unless there are no other qualified applicants and the superintendent agrees and the Board of Ed has a 2/3 vote and there is no line of supervision conflict, that line of conflict for supervising still applies. That's a little wordy and we can rework it. I don't expect this one to be voted on and moved on to the board tonight because whatever we decide has to go back to Shipman and Goodwin for a legal okay. So that's the one thing, because under line 32 and 33, it says no individual shall be hired in a position of employment that would result in a supervisory or evaluative relationship between a current employee and a relative. So if we go back to our current policy, this little paragraph is not in the new revised, but we can certainly put it back in. It says members of the same family, not in the same line of supervision, may be employed at the same department or work location when approved in writing by the superintendent or the superintendent's designee, and then we can add, and a 2/3 vote by the Board of Ed. That way, I think we kind of get more people seeing the special circumstances.
It's more public.
Right, it's definitely in the public eye. And also, I did note that lines 48, 49 are redundant. It says same thing as 32 and 33, and so I don't know if we need that in there. That's just an aside. And that was the only thing that I could think of that we could somehow still protect ourselves and make sure that anyone that we hire is not going to be directly supervised or even indirectly supervised, which is why I didn't do anything about the superintendent clause, because your family's out. But because everyone falls under you, right? So, except for us. But everyone else, like even if it was a Board of Ed member's family member, you're our CEO essentially, or whatever, like you do the administrating of policy. You just sort of like do the policy and stuff. So you report to us, but we don't have really direct supervision over that person that you would hire if they are related. And that would still require your written, whatever. And I was also wondering if we should add in there, like whatever building they would fall under, like the principal of that building would have to okay it. Because obviously it would somehow fall under them. And the only thing I could think of that doesn't quite fit that would be like, okay, let's say it's at the high school level and it's, they need someone to teach Mandarin and it's like TJ's, niece. Then who would she answer to? Ultimately, it can't be him. Then maybe we need a clause in there somehow that says that you would designate someone to be her supervisor. I don't know how that would work. That would be something.
And I would caution against saying, I kind of understand the thought process
It's a little
behind all of the
convoluted, but-
conditions, but the condition that said, unless there's no other applicants, I would caution against
Qualified.
keeping it that, I would open that up a little bit and be like, unless there's a limited pool of applicants or something like that.
Yeah, I tried that, like,
Yeah.
limited pool of qualified applicants and a limited field.
You can bring those together.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
A candidate that applied for that job that felt that they were qualified, but maybe the reference check didn't work out, could come back and say,
So, but that was my thought process there. It's a little convoluted, but, it's like.
What do you think about that?
I worry about the board putting themselves in a position to vote, because what if the board declines, what if it doesn't? if it passes?
Well, the only reason I thought of that was because in case there's something fishy going on with like you and the applicant or TJ and the applicant, you know what I mean? Like, because it's a smaller, it's like just, example.
Well-
Because it's a smaller number of people, you get more oversight and we would do things in, like, I don't know if that would come up under executive session, but it would be more people knowing what's going on. You're like, hey, I don't really see that as a conflict because like who else speaks Mandarin? You know what I mean?
Well,
It's just-
that's what I was gonna say, I'm glad you said executive session, because I wonder if it might not be better to trust the superintendent to bring potential situations to us regarding personnel matters in executive session. And then us being, the board being impaneled as the conscience of the community, we don't have to vote on it, we just need to discuss it with the superintendent, let him know whether,
The only thing I don't like about
You can't take an
that-
action in executive
Yeah,
session, though, but we could discuss it and be like,
but then it could still be something that's like on the agenda, so it's in the public view of, we're discussing this. You can't hear what we're saying about details, because anything with employment, no one can hear anyway.
Right.
But knowing that we're reviewing this so that like nothing underhanded or sneaky is going on.
but how do you get through that discussion without talking about the qualifications? And one man's qualification is another woman's,
Right, but it's not just him either. I mean, we have HR, and you have people in the hiring.
You always could
process.
waive your policy, and you always could waive your, so if we were in a situation where there was a physics teacher only applicant, and I came to you and I said, look, this is going to be in violation of the nepotism policy, but I'm asking you to waive it because I have no other applicants. Here's this person's qualifications. I think that's a safer situation than
The trying
writing
to
into
handle.
than having
policy.
us pass judgment on
Uh,
prospective hires. Yeah, it is a bit tough for us to put ourselves in that position. Plus also, how do we know who's qualified and not? We're not qualified necessarily to judge who's qualified for a position. So I kind of like Craig's idea where just leave it the way it is. If there's an issue, he'll come to us and say, I have a limited pool, I've only got one qualified person, we need to fill this position, would you guys consider waiving your policy? Then we could vote on the record to waive the policy on a one-time basis. Because we've been presented by the, the superintendent with a very specific situation, we're having trouble filling the
I
position.
guess
And
my view on that is I would want as much information in the public eye as possible without, compromising privacy.
Make the
Because it's-
situation transparent, but not necessarily like the interview process and all of that
Or the
stuff.
people's names.
Because I just don't want it to be like, well, the Board of Ed doing sneaky underhanded things with the superintendent,
Yeah, but regardless, personnel matters tend to be viewed that way by the skeptical public anyway, because we need to be in executive session to guard people's, contractual and other privacy rights.
Right, but if it's something like, oh, well, principal's daughter got hired, what happened there? You know what I mean? Like, I like the idea of most of the Shipman and Goodwin's protection because it is so strict. I just worry about like how much information could be released, because I would want to release as much as possible so that the public doesn't think that we're doing anything underhanded.
I guess if it's, to Diane's point, if it's listed in the policy, like all the steps that would need to be considered before getting to that point, then we could at least send them to the policy as a reference and be like, well, this is our policy on this. A, B, C, D, and E all need to be met before we would even get to the point
And I was
of
just
discussing it.
Coming up with ideas, like, we don't have to include all that, but, so I think about it.
Yeah.
See if we can come up with a better wording, and maybe I can, throw all that in front of Shipman and Goodwin and
Sure.
say,
Right.
how much is really doable and how much is really not so smart.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
That's why I'm not awake. So then we can just move on. Are you okay with that, Maureen?
Yeah, Diane, I totally agree with you. We just need to work on the wording, but as transparent as we can be on that would be wonderful, because I could see the situation that you talked about coming
Maybe
to
I can work
fruition.
Yeah, maybe I can work on the wording with you and Wendy.
Sure.
And then I'll let you guys know and we'll send it to Shipman and Goodwin and then it'll come back to policy. Cool. All right, what time is it?
Great, thank you.
All right,
23.
All right, 5120.3.3, administration of student medications in the schools. This is gonna be fast, believe it or not. So, previously, I had many reservations about this. However, we have learned that we have to be in compliance with Connecticut statute, and therefore we cannot change the things that I wanted to change. Not yet, but I know a guy who
here
knows a
anyway.
guy,
Not here,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
State level's a different
And
story.
mark my words, 2 sessions, it's changed and we'll revisit this. So anyway, so going forward, I hope you all read it because the main things, the changes, there was a lot of changes from the current policy to the revised. Most of it was definitions, it's all Connecticut statute, and the main thing was that we have to get the Narcan administration wording in here. It needs to be passed by November, to be in compliance with something. So, here it is. Hold on. Shipman recommends the Board of Appeal replace the current policy from 2015 for consistency and legal compliance. Of particular note is the inclusion of the use of naloxone, also known as Narcan, which school nurses recently received training in. This needs to be added to our safety and security plans, which are submitted annually November 1st to the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. So, does anyone have any comments or questions or problems with the revised policy 5120.3.3, administration of student medications in schools? Once, twice, Maureen, anything? Nope. Jen? Nope. I need a motion to move this forward to board.
Motion to move 5120.3 forward to the board with the recommendation that were made by Shipman.
Second,
Second,
thank you all in favor. Aye. Aye.
aye.
And it passes. Moving on. All right, we're actually gonna do 9460 advisory committees first. Because it's alluded to in policy 7551. 9460, the revised bylaws, there was a lot of crossouts. There were no other changes besides the ones that you received, so the revisions are all there. The main thing is there's a lot of crossouts. The line 11, the board will, and then it jumps down to line 23. So this is regarding advisory committees established by the board. Madison Board of Ed shall establish an advisory committee by board vote when the board determines that the establishment of a committee is necessary or desirable. The establishment and functioning of the committee will be subject to the following requirements. The board will, jump down to line 23, appoint the members of the committee and establish the scope and general schedule or expected timeframe of the committee's work, which will be clearly communicated to the committee when it is appointed. Persons appointed will be residents concerned with public education who are able to dedicate the effort, time, and talent needed for the committee's assignment at the discretion of the board. One or more board members may be appointed to serve on the committee in an advisory role. I'm pointing that out because we will refer to it in the next policy if we get to it tonight. All committees will be temporary, blah, blah, blah. All the changes are as is. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or problems with the revised 9460 advisory committees as presented?
I do not.
Maureen?
I'm sorry, my mute keeps going on somehow.
It's okay.
No, I do not have an issue. It sounds good.
I have a motion to move 9460 forward as revised.
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll
All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. Moving on. Last one, 7551. We're gonna get this done. We got 3 minutes. All right. This is under facilities. This is policy 7551, the naming, renaming of school buildings, components of school buildings and or school grounds. The very first change is to change the wording of components to major portions of. So the very first line that mentions that is line 6. Following through the rest of the policy, it was not changed, but I did go through and change it. So the policy, if we decide to move it forward tonight, which I hope that we will include all of those changes every time it says components of. It will be changed to major portions of. So go to line 25. This is where it says the board shall establish a committee consistent with board policy 9460. That's the one we just did. To expedite and facilitate the board's decision regarding whether and how to name a new building, major portions of buildings, or school grounds. Then if you continue to read down, the board shall seek the advice of the superintendent before establishing or dissolving committees. Such committees shall be established and dissolved by board vote, and the members of the committee shall be appointed by the board. The committee shall be comprised of the chair of the Board of Ed, ex officio, superintendent, ex officio, and this is where we need a little change. Instead of saying a board member, it should say one or more board members to be consistent with policy 9460 that we just talked about. So that would be the change that is not currently in your revision that you can just pencil in right now. Then the building principal, faculty members, parents, guardians, community members, and appropriate students. The board will establish a scope of and schedule for the committee's work, which shall include but not be limited to recommending potential names for consideration by the board and any criteria the board wishes to consider the process. Then going down to line 50, there is a weird paragraph that says when considering names for, and this will be changed to major portions of a building, such names shall meet additional criteria, including but not limited to being representative of a curricular discipline. Do you have any comments on that, Dr. Cook? I find that to be weirdly stated.
Right, yeah, I'm not really sure what that's trying to accomplish.
I would just take that right out. Any comments on that?
I'm fine with taking that out.
I think it's oddly worded. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is.
And it still
Unless it was
says
like a-
component of the building instead of a major section.
Yeah, major portions of.
I could see like maybe it means if you were redoing or renaming, say, the theater, and it's like, you know, the Mackenzie Theater or
And
something.
I feel like that's
maybe
covered
but
anyway,
yeah.
you know, under like, because if you name, if you read the paragraph above, it talks about at a minimum, if any of the committee suggestions reflect the name of an individual, such individual must be shown to have had broad-based long-term impact on the Madison Public Schools, the district, and its community. Individuals to be considered shall blah, 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 blah. So there's a whole bunch of things that they have to fulfill. Anyway, I feel like 50 to 54 is just like verbose for no reason. I say remove it. Is everyone good with that? Maureen?
Yes.
Excellent. Jen?
Yeah.
Good. All right, so that's the other revision.
Oh,
You following, Seth?
I'm following, but
Okay.
I'm now going back to 39 through 41.
Yes.
Are we limiting ourselves as a board to have buildings named after members of the community that had a long-term impact on that?
Yes, we are.
The schools.
But it is
So you
consistent
don't want
with
to
our-
call it like, you know, George Washington School or something like that.
It's not a change from the current policy, it's just worded differently. And I don't know if you remember when we just named the wrestling gym after the wrestling coach.
I'm just wondering if, we want to limit ourselves in that way, or the advisory committee wants to,
Well, I'm
maybe
okay
after
with
a
not moving
historical
this forward,
figure or
yeah,
something.
I'm definitely okay with like talking about this some more, I just wanted to bring this up sooner rather than later, because, one of the things that we talk about with naming, a building, if you look at line 15, is a policy of the board to name school buildings as close as possible to the time construction begins in order to lessen any confusion about new schools. When naming or renaming new buildings, major portions of buildings or school grounds, the board shall formally identify the need for a naming process, if any, for the identified location. So that's why we're doing this now. So we don't have to move this forward, we can talk about it ad nauseum if you'd like. I just wanted to make sure we got 9460 in first before we did this.
And I just wanted to say, Seth, it's not completely in line with what you're saying with historical figures, but line 45 does give allowances for a non-employee of the Madison Board of Education who's made an exceptional contribution to the children of Madison for an extended period. So it doesn't limit us to just school employees.
And then it does say particular attention shall be given to local candidates with a record of outstanding achievement and public service, as evidenced by at least 10 letters of recommendation.
No, I mean, I understand that it's qualified to the hilt to try and pick a good person locally, but do we want to tie ourselves to a person in the community and not broaden it to historical figures or, a lot of schools are named after famous people like presidents or
I see what you're saying.
civil rights activists or whatever.
Well, we can table it for now because it is 7:32.
Yes.
So, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second,
all in favor? Aye.
aye.